Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Fantasy for the Ages, the show where father and son sit down and talk about fantasy, science fiction, and whatever other nerdiness we feel like talking about. Today, I'm here without my son. You know that happens from time to time. He has a life, he has a girlfriend, he has a dog. These things command his attention beyond literature. But I have someone else with us today. I have a good friend and guest, Eric. Eric, say hello.
Hello, everyone. Great to be here.
There we go. There we go. Eric has been, with us for a long time, following the channel, the podcast, but this is his first time coming on with us, and we're glad to have you here. We've brought him specifically because of the topic we're going to talk about, which you saw the title. You know, it's about Stephen King today. And
Yes.
Eric seems to like Stephen King. Go figure. Me too. We're going to have a fun conversation today. But before we do that, it's always important to check in with the people you're with. So, Eric, how are you today?
I am great today. Like Jim, I work in the school world. So I just finished my school year and well, it's never totally done, but it's kind of wrapped up. And this is the first weekend of summer. So I
Yes.
feel a relaxation.
Nice, nice. Yeah, indeed. Uh, Closure, move on to something fresh.
Exactly.
Yeah, yeah. And your first real day of summer, and you get up early to get on a show with me.
I
Thank
always
you.
get up
We are
early.
honored. I knew that about you, actually,
Yeah. Yeah.
as do I. So
I actually
we're West.
slept in today.
Well, look at that. West Coast, we're both out here on the West Coast of the United States. So it's 8 a.m. in the morning for us, but I've been up since 5:30. It's like, it's all good. All good. We also always on this show check on what we're drinking because, you got to drink something when you do a podcast. You get parched, you
Yeah,
have to keep
exactly.
yourself liquidated, but it's 8 in the morning. So I'm drinking coffee today. I do have my Fantasy for the Ages bling here,
Sweet
which looks really
merch.
fun against a green screen. You
Yeah,
see how
you're
it's
getting the
showing
Stephen
through?
King book in the background. That's amazing.
Nice
I
coffee. How about you, Eric? What are you drinking?
I have a big old stein of H2O, beautiful water.
Oh,
The same
you know,
drink that Stephen King loves these days.
well, there you go. My son tells me that's a dangerous drink. Everyone who drinks water dies.
It's true. It's true.
Absolutely. All right, so we are indeed here to talk about Stephen King, an author we both enjoy, possibly for similar reasons. We might have different reasons of what we like about him. But let's
Yeah,
just start easy and talk about how we got into him in the first place. So I'd love you to do that first. Tell us your history
sure.
of reading Stephen King.
Sure. And before I tell you that, I want to apologize for my fuzzy camera quality. I look super different than Jim, but it's really because it's not because I'm using my son's cheap camera. It's because I just came out of the mist.
See, nice. A true King fan gets that.
Yes. Hopefully
Hopefully,
you
you
did
don't
get
have any
that.
of those creatures crawling into your room.
No, we're
Although,
firmly shored up in the office here, so
okay,
I'm
very
sure
good.
nothing can get in. And I'm not going
Nothing
to go
like
venturing out there.
spiders or tarantulas. Oh,
There
do you have
are
one of
there
those in your room,
are
Rabbi?
there are 9 tarantulas in the room with me. You can't really see them. I can't move the camera. One of them is back there in that cage, but the rest of
Oh,
them
yeah,
are off
there we
to the
go.
side.
An interesting thing about Eric, he loves tarantulas. He
Stephen
doesn't
King
have a lot of
tarantulas.
friends.
No, no, not a lot who will come in here anyway.
Right?
So
Especially when they have a penchant to get loose on occasion.
it gives me an opportunity to clean the office. So you can tell one has not gotten loose in a while.
Okay.
So what's the question again? What got me into Stephen King?
Yeah, yeah.
So I was thinking about this, getting ready for this episode, and trying to really remember if there was some one moment where I first picked up my first Stephen King book and dove into the world. And I cannot remember exactly what the first thing I read was or when.
We're both getting
I
old. That's our
yeah,
problem. We can't think back that far.
right. I mean, I'm pretty sure it was high school. I know that, I was a kid in the 80s and 90s, so I knew about Stephen King because everyone
Mhm.
knows about Stephen King. Um, I didn't see Stand By Me when it came out in 86 because I was only 7, but I did see it. I can't remember if I knew Shawshank Redemption was Stephen King when I saw the movie when it came out in 94.
I did not. I found out later, but, oh,
Yeah,
that's a good
a
one. We can
great
talk about
movie.
that later.
I know that I watched that movie a bunch of times in high school, but I can't remember if I had read or knew it was Stephen King. But so I don't know what got me into Stephen King in the
Do
first
you think you
place.
got into King more from adaptations first? Am I kinda
I
hearing maybe you saw some of his stuff and then got into the books?
Well, I don't think so because I think I didn't realize Shawshank Redemption was Stephen King, and it was
Right.
like a happy, like for many people, it was a happy like, oh, that's Stephen King. How cool is that? I like it even better now. So I don't remember the first reading of it, but I know that at least since college on, I have I have a terrible problem of I'll read a book here and there, and then I'll go back to Stephen King, and then I'll venture out away from Stephen King for another book, and then I'll go back to Stephen King, and it helps that he releases a book almost every year, so there's almost always a new Stephen King.
He's prolific. Mhm.
But I have read his library multiple times.
Okay. I share a sort of a similar story. It was around college I started reading Stephen King. I'm not sure if I'd picked any up in high school. I don't think so. But it was early in college that I did start reading. And by the time I got out into my career and had a real job finally, I was well into Stephen King books. I was a member of the Stephen King book club where they'd send me a book a month, and I'm catching up on all these books that are out there for him. Really liked it. Uh, Ironically, I got to a point where I canceled my Stephen King book club membership because they were all starting to feel a little bit the same. And it was right at that point where his books actually shift tone, and I totally missed it for years. That, oh, he went a different direction with things. We'll
Yeah,
talk more
yeah.
about that later too.
Each decade of King is a little different, and
Hmm.
he tries new things, which is fun.
Hmm. What do you particularly appreciate about King's writing?
You know, everyone asks me that when they find out Stephen King's my favorite author, but it's more like why? Um, and it is there's a piece that's hard to explain, which I can best just describe as I feel like we are kindred spirits. Like
Mm.
his writing hits my wavelength just perfectly. But some unpacking that a little bit, I very much appreciate his characterization and the time he spends building characters.
Oh, he
Um,
makes them so real.
yeah, he's
Real, genuine, authentic people.
definitely, yeah, character centered, and plot just serves to kind of be a background. He's not a super huge world builder. He
No.
does, but it's more painting in light strokes, and his characters are far more developed. So I love that. Um, I really like, and a lot of people don't who haven't read him widely will not know this, but most of his books are actually very optimistic. He plays a lot with good versus evil, the white versus the red in his case, and
Yes.
um, and most of the time, good prevails. The white wins out. We'll talk about Richard Bachman, I think, and that's where he kind of goes a different direction. But most of them have happy and hopeful endings, and I like that. I love that he just has a love for language and playing with language, and he's a popular writer, and you might even call him a pulp writer, but uh, he's a very talented one. His use
Mhm.
of language is top tier. So, and then finally, I think he grew up Methodist, which is a Protestant Christian, and I too am a Protestant Christian, and I just see that influence deeply through most of his books, and some of them more directly, like Desperation is very much a God is a character in that book.
Hmm.
And I appreciate that. I appreciate he doesn't know all the answers, but he explores the nature of God. He explores the questions that all people have through his writing, and I love that ride every time too.
He definitely touches on some significant themes in all of his books in different ways, but very much through those characters and just
Yeah.
their own explorations, discoveries, wonderings. Uh, I'll say one other thing about the characters and the way he makes them so real, as it also ties to the adage that authors do best if they write what they know. And I feel like I know a lot about Maine and the people of Maine, the true people of Maine. I've never been to Maine. I'm going there later this month for the very first time. And I'm like, I feel like I already know what to expect.
You have
They're
to
not
learn
all going
how
to
to,
talk like his people, probably, but
yeah, yeah. You if you go to the smaller towns, you might find that you have to learn how to say the word that is spelled Ayuh. But yep,
yeah,
because
yeah,
the Maine people
yeah.
say that a lot in his books. I didn't know
I
you were
actually
going to Maine. That's
interviewed
awesome.
recently another author from Maine. I checked with Stephen King; he was busy; his calendar was full. But Mark Tufo is an author of the Zombie Fallout series and other things that I really enjoy. And he came on, and we had a nice interview time together. And his Maine accent is rich. I loved it. I'm like, yeah, I'm gonna enjoy visiting Maine.
You know, Stephen King's a huge audiobook fan and supporter, and he's read a lot of his works. And I've listened to a lot of his on audiobooks too.
As have I.
And
Hmm.
I especially appreciate the ones he's done himself. Like he did Desperation, and just listening to he has a
That's
weird voice.
contentious. That's contentious in the
Yes,
fandom. There's some
I
are like,
know.
stop
Stop
reading
doing
your
it.
books. I I haven't had a problem. I haven't done Desperation on audiobook, but I did hear Stephen King in Rose Matter, where he
Mm.
does the psycho as
He,
opposed to a different person for the woman. And it
uh,
was like,
yeah,
hmm,
yeah,
he wasn't up to the same game as the other audiobook narrator. That's all.
fully agree with you. I think the reason I appreciate it is because I love Stephen King,
It's Stephen
and
King.
it's Stephen King, and his voice is weird. I mean, it's weird. He doesn't do voices very well, but I just love it, and I
Yeah,
always
yeah.
love an author reading their own book.
Okay.
So
Yeah. They're not messing up the intention
the
of what a
pronunciations of
phrase
the names,
says,
yeah.
right? Yeah, yeah. Is there anything about Stephen King's writing you don't particularly care for? Might
Uh,
be tough as a fanboy to actually
yeah.
say something, but is
I'm a
there something that
fanboy.
comes to mind?
Um, I don't share a lot of the criticism. A lot of people say they don't like his endings, uh, and I think I don't have a problem with his endings. I think just jumps so fully into the world that he also doesn't want it to end, just like I never want his
Mm.
books to end. So he kind of just like end. But I don't have a problem with that. I There are certain books that I'm like, eh, not his best effort. But no, I pretty much have found something to enjoy in every piece I've read by him.
Yeah. Okay. Well, that matches up with my experience. Not all of the Stephen King books I've read are like my favorite books ever,
Yeah.
and there are certainly some I will never bother to read again. But I've never had any compulsion to not finish one of his books. I'm
Yes.
still sucked into the story. He's such a good storyteller
Yeah.
that you're grabbed, even if it's not your jam. And I've read a few like that recently, where I'm like, this isn't quite my thing, but I still want to know how this story ends. I'm still into what I'm reading.
Yeah.
So along those lines, it moves us to I want to ask about his Richard Bachman books.
Yeah.
You know, do you consider those as truly Stephen King books, or are they in a different class or category for you?
I do, and I listen to a Stephen King podcast called King Slingers that I really like, and they delve deep into his works, and they're in they just finished up with The Long Walk, which is one of the
Hmm.
Bachman books, which I love. But anyway, so they've talked about the same thing. Um, as I understand it, there are kind of two things that inspired Richard Bachman. First, when Stephen King started, he was so prolific. He was writing so much, and in the publishing world at the time, there was kind of an unwritten like authors can only put out one book a year. And 80s King was pumping out like 4 books a year. He was writing that many.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So he thought, well, I'll just make another name so I can get my books out there. So that's kind of one of the theories.
Okay.
The other one is that he had hit the big time, and he had got to a point of like anything that has the name Stephen King will be a bestseller. And so it was an experiment to say, can I do it again? Or is this just some happy accident? So he slapped another name on it and wrote these books. Um, and at
I
first
hadn't
they
heard
didn't,
either of those before, so that's
yeah.
fascinating.
At first his Bachman books, and he didn't know there was no extra promotion or any like, the next big Stephen King book is coming out. They just came as trade paperbacks.
Mm-hmm.
And they did modestly well. Of course, after Bachman was discovered to be king,
It was
they
outed.
saw a huge spike.
Yeah.
But if you read them, uh, and I'm totally cribbing this from King Slingers, but he uses words, slang words, for things like boobs, jahoobies. No other author calls calls them jahoobies, but Stephen King. So, King
Uh,
Slingers are like, if you got this far in the book and you didn't know it was Stephen King, this is a dead giveaway. The blue chambray shirt, it shows up in 90% of Stephen King books, and it's in Bachman books. So it's like not hard. It's not like he super disguised his writing. So yes, I totally think they're Stephen King books. He
okay.
he he will say, the Bachman books are for like my darker side. And it is true that most of them end not generally on a high note. They're more tragedy like. So in that way, they're set apart a little bit, but
Yeah, see,
it,
that's where I've always looked at it. They are King books, but he takes a different angle on the style of the book, the way it's going to end. It's like he gave
mhm,
himself permission to do it a
yeah,
little different than he
yeah,
usually does in his books. And
yeah.
and that's what happens there.
Yeah, there was a freedom aspect for him. Like, Stephen King fans expect Stephen King.
Mhm.
So I want to write this however I want. So,
My most recent Stephen King read was a Bachman book. When I read Blaze, which is up on my screen still, this was
yep,
one of
I
the
see
more
it.
recent ones, and it was
2007.
hilarious. Richard Bachman, Blaze, forward by Stephen King. I'm like, really, dude?
Well, that one was 2007. I mean, long,
Yeah.
long after it had been
Yeah, there
exposed.
was a reason for his forward by Stephen King,
Yeah.
but it felt a little meta too. I'm like, come on, really?
That's like the very less well-known only children's book Stephen King ever wrote, Charlie the Choo Choo, which appears in one of the Dark Tower books. They actually have, I should have brought it. It's a hardcover children's book, and there's a
Huh.
line on the front that says, "If I was to write children's books, this would be the one I write, Stephen King."
The dude
And
has a sense of humor. You gotta
it's
like
by
that.
Beryl Evans, which is a totally fictional person he made up. So yeah, love it.
um,
His meta
I
stuff I just love. Some people hate
yeah.
it, but I love it. And
No,
he
no, that's where you're
refuses to.
getting into the true King verse, and
Yes.
yeah, yeah,
And
I
he
enjoy
doesn't
that
like the
too.
word meta. He's like, I just wanted to do this, so I did it. He hates being put into that box of like, oh, Stephen King meta. He's like, I just thought this would be fun, so I did it.
And the fans think it's fun too, so yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
Now, you appreciate Stephen King, not just the books, but you've described it just as a person. You kind of think this is a cool dude, and you enjoy the way he writes, and you get him and such. Have you read his autobiographical self-help book then on writing, A Memoir of the Craft?
I have read it at least 4 times, probably parts of it more. Yes, I
Does
love
not
it.
surprise me. I have not, but I've seen the reviews on it. It sounds pretty awesome, both as a
Yeah.
memoir, but then apparently the writing manual part at the end is very practical, is what people describe. Is that your experience?
Yeah. Also noteworthy, and you might want to take it in this way. The audiobook is read by Stephen King. So I like that part. Um, I've as an aspiring writer myself, I've read not all the how to write books because I don't know. I think it's a pretty personal thing how each person writes.
Sure.
Um, I love it more for learning about Stephen King. I love the memoir part more. I think as a practical guide to writing, I, I just think Stephen King is so, his talent is so natural that it's not really teachable. And to
Mm,
read him try to teach it, it's sort of like you don't even know how good you are and that most people cannot do what you're saying. Like for instance, he'll say in there, and I know from reading lots of other stuff that he does more than 2 drafts, but he'll basically say, "Yeah, I bang out a draft, my first draft. I go for 2,000 words a day. Don't open the door until I get it. I got a first draft in 3 to 4 months, and then I will. The first draft is just for me, and then when I go through and do the second draft, it's he says I open the door. I'm considering my constant reader." Um, no writer gets a book published with 2 drafts, but that's what he lays out in his book. Like, hey, bang it out, get it all out there, and then go through and fix it, and then you're good. So he has some good nuggets of advice, like any good writer's book
hmm
does, but that's not what I love about on writing. I just love it sheds a little more light on where some of his recurring themes were born and how he can write certain characters so well because it just gives more background to his life. So
Okay.
he the thing that my favorite thing about on writing, which is the best writing advice, is he says if you're writing, you have to tell the truth. Tell the truth. Don't write something because you think someone will like it. If you're not telling the truth, you're cheating yourself and your reader. And so that's very ambiguous as a writing advice, but it's also like that hits, right? Like
Okay.
tell the truth. So you'll see that. I mean, in his books, there's some things that you're like, ugh, violence toward children and things like that. He doesn't shy away from it because he's like, if I'm doing this, I'm going all in. Tell the truth. So I appreciate that.
Seems to work for his book sales.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah, indeed. Speaking of book sales, and you mentioned it already, about a book a year still, he's churning these things out. You can always look for, oh, there's another Stephen King novel coming out. The most recent one last year, September, was Fairy Tale. Have you read that one then?
Yes, of course.
And thoughts? We're not giving spoilers on anything. We're just talking in
Sure,
generalities about books. But what'd you
sure.
think of this one?
So I've only read it once. I haven't done a reread yet. Uh, but I read it in book form, which for me takes a lot longer than audiobook form because I
Oh,
generally
sure.
I'll read before bed and I read until I get loopy and pass out. Um,
I've done that many times now. Yes.
so, so it took me a long time to read, and I don't. I mean, I need to reread it a few times to remember specifics. But the thing the feeling I'm left with from Fairy Tale is it feels very old school King. The other titles that came to my mind when I thought Fairy Tale were Eyes of the Dragon, which was released in 84, and The Talisman, also
Mm,
84. So it felt more like vintage King,
I
which
like that though
was
then.
awesome. Yes,
Yeah,
yes.
yeah.
So
Because
good
yeah,
total
because
fantasy with the fairy tale world.
right.
Good. I love it when he does children. You know, I work with children. I'm around children a lot. My inner age is 11. So the main character is like a high school senior, so not really a
Mhm.
child, but a younger
Yeah.
person. Um, and it was a fun read. I will definitely reread.
Yeah, I like hearing that because I'm nowhere close to fairy tale yet. I've this has been the year of King for me, and I've been putting out little episodes as I work my way through the books that I've missed
I
over the
love those.
years.
Watch the short episodes, by the way. They're really good.
Thank you for the
Five
plug.
minutes of
There you go. I'd read all the classic stuff back in the day, but then again, kind of fell away, and the only hit or miss caught a few things now and then. I'm up through Blaze now, so I've been working through a section where I haven't enjoyed them as much. They're still good Stephen King books, but
yeah,
I'm missing the old King at this point. So it's
yeah.
good to hear he's going to get back to some other things that I'll really like again. Next up for me is Duma Key. I
Also
have this in.
looking interesting with your background.
I know, I know. There we go. Got the angle
Yeah,
right. I have this in a hardcover because I found it at a used bookstore. Check
a
out the
beautiful
price I
copy.
got this for.
Oh, a steal.
$3.99, man. That was great. So I've had it for years now. I bought it back in Alaska before I moved down here.
Yeah,
And I don't like to keep a lot of physical books anymore. They take up space and they're
I know
heavy.
that about you, especially
And
Stephen
I
King books.
actually, yeah, especially. And I prefer to read in Kindle these days or an audiobook. But uh, this one, it was a pretty cover and it was cheap. So it's sitting here and I'm finally going to read it soon now.
Okay,
But
no,
but
without
after Duma,
spoilers. Oh, go ahead.
yeah,
Go ahead.
after Duma Key, the only thing I've read is his 2009 novel Under the Dome. And I read that one because the TV adaptation was coming out. And I was like, I
Yeah.
don't want to watch an adaptation that I haven't read the source material. I loved Under the Dome. It's a good book. Um, but nothing else
Okay.
since then. I don't have any of the more recent things.
So without
So
spoilers, I'll tell you, at least for me personally, yeah, the early 2000s ones are usually those ones, and the some of the late 90s and 90s ones are the ones that I'm like, Doom McKee is not one of those. You will,
it's a good
I
one.
put Doom McKee higher. It's
Nice.
more it feels more like Bag of Bones to me, a little more gothic, a little more romantic.
Oh, I'm
Um,
excited. Good, good,
it's
good.
it's a great read. Also very good on audio. That is not narrated by Stephen King, but the
And thus, no, sorry.
audiobook is good. Yeah, yeah, I love Duma McKee. It's a good feel. It's a good summer book. So you're
Okay,
coming to it at the perfect time.
there we are.
Yeah.
Um, are there any Stephen King books you haven't read?
I'm ashamed to say yes. There are there are three. Three that I have not read.
And with
Um
your love for him, I'm almost like these must be protest books then. You're just, no, I'm
Yeah.
not reading these.
Two are not novels, and one I just noticed in this appendix of his works that I'm like, what? I never heard of that. And so I
Oh,
think it might be a not novel too. So I have not read Danse Macabre, which is his book about horror writing. I
uh-huh.
want to read it. I just have not got to it yet.
Okay.
I haven't read Storm of the Century, which is a script,
Oh yeah, screenplay. I've read
a
that.
screenplay. so I haven't read that. I prefer the novel form, so it hasn't been a priority. And then I noticed in my appendix here, there's a 2004 book called Faithful with Stuart Onan. That was looking
Mm,
at this appendix, I was like, what? Never heard of that. So I don't know if it's a novel or if it's a sort of a autobiographical, or I don't know what it is, but you can bet
got
that
it.
I'm going to be looking and figuring out what it is.
Okay. Okay. Are there I know the answer to this question already, are there any books you've read more than once? And you already told us one of them. Yeah, I've read it at least 4 times,
Yes,
So,
I've read. Well, so here's the thing. The last couple of years, I'm back in school work now, but the last couple of years I've been painting houses, and these little things are miracles of,
yes.
um, you know, hands-free listening. And painting houses does not require a lot of brain power. So I can get 8 hours of listening a day sometimes. So it's very easy to go through a lot of books. So
Mhm.
I've done a lot of his books in the last couple of years over again as audio, and even the Dark Tower, I can go through all 7 or 8 if you're counting um, the Wind Through the Keyhole
Mhm.
in less than 2 weeks, probably. So, and I have done that. It's very fun to take it in huge chunks like that.
There
So
you
I
go.
think I've read probably all the books, again, fairy tale only ones. I've read a lot of them more than once. The books that I've read more than once, I actually, you sent me this question, so I compiled a list.
Nice.
I've read Carrie multiple times, Salem's Lot, Rage, all the short story collections. Those are good road trip. Like if you're going on a short,
Okay.
hour long or 2 hour drive, the short story collections are good. The Stand I've read probably 4 or 5 times, and that's a big book. Uh, Long Walk, Running Man, Dark Tower, Christine, Pet Cemetery, Eyes of the Dragon. I really loved that might have been my first King book. It's
Ah,
sort of
okay.
a more YA kind of kid book. I've read Eyes of the Dragon probably half a dozen times. Talisman, Black House, I've read those two several times. It, Misery. I I stopped there because I was just going down the appendix like, yep, 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 yep. Like I told you, I'm not as widely read because I have a problem of like read a book, back to Stephen King, read a book,
Yeah.
back to Stephen King.
Yeah.
So
I've only got one book that I've read more than once. And, part of the problem is there's so much out there I still want to read. Stephen
yes,
King books too that I'm still
you're
trying to read. So
you're a
how do I
much
take
more
time to go
responsible
back?
reader.
The one book that I've read more than once is The Stand. My
Yeah,
favorite Stephen King book. And I never bothered with the short version. I mean, this is the
the 90.
unabridged full edition,
Yeah,
which I thought was awesome. Basically, okay, he did his book The Stand, which was too long. They wouldn't publish that, so he had to shorten it down. Then comes back later going, "Now, you know who I am, right? Yes, Mr. King, we'll publish whatever you want now." And
just
that's
give
the
us
version that
everything. Yes.
and I love it. So I've read it at least 3 times. Always physical. I've never listened to that. I do plan to redo The Dark Tower, and when I read through that, it's going to be when I'm going to get the new stuff, the 8th book, and I think there's another novella they stuck in too, if I
Yes,
remember right.
the
And
little,
I haven't gotten
yeah,
either of those yet. So when I'm ready to do those, I'm going to do a reread, and I think I'll do Audible this time for The Dark Tower. It's just
yes. Dark Tower, great audio. I mean, you get Frank Muller for, well, he redid The Gunslinger after he was into it a few, because he went back and changed some things and added. But Frank Muller was one of his top narrators for a lot of his books. Uh, and then he had a bad motorcycle accident in like 2001, so he didn't
yeah.
do the last few books, but haunting, the audiobooks of the Dark Tower. And then the guy that did the other ones is named George Guidell. Very good too, a totally different voice, but
Okay.
Dark Tower audio A plus. So on the Stand, the same thing you said, like it was great, and I've read pretty much most of my reads have been the 90 version. There's some criticism because the original stand was 78, a totally different political time than 1990, and
Sure.
he updated it kind of, but you can't rewrite the stand to be 1990, late 80s. So it still will feel very 70s, even though it's supposed to be set. He updated some of the years and stuff. It's like, but that doesn't take away for me. I love the
Yeah.
stand.
Yeah. Oh, it's great. So I want to ask, when we really enjoy literature, partly it's because it moves us. There's something about what we're reading touches something, and we're like, oh, So which of his books I wanted to say, and we'll go back and forth on this. So
Sure.
don't just give me your list. Give me one, and then I'll give you one, and we'll go back and forth. Which
Perfect.
of his books moved you the most, and just briefly why? What is it about it? So I'll start, and I'm going to toss out The Stand. This is one that, oh, man. And for me, what is it that moves me? It's the sense of sacrifice, of how people are willing to, for the good of others, for the love of others, make sacrifice, and just they'll do it. They'll give up everything. Uh,
Yeah.
yeah.
The
Again, see,
character.
no spoilers really. It's just
Yep. Yep.
spoiler light.
The
Yeah.
the character arcs in that book are so magnificently done. And
Yes.
so like that's one of his super optimistic, hopeful books.
And to see people
So
who have choices before
yeah,
them, and to
yeah.
make the right or some who
And
make the
make the
wrong
wrong.
choice, and like,
Yeah.
oh, it could have been so different.
Yes.
Dude, what are you doing? Yeah. Yeah.
Well, okay, so I'm not sure if I'm starting with my probably if you forced me to only pick one favorite or said there's only one Stephen King book you can read for the rest of your life, I would probably pick It.
Okay.
And I think what I love about It, I as I made my list, I was thinking what's similar with all these books. Uh, as I told you before, I love children. I work with them. I just love the exuberance, the energy, the innocence, the you know naivety, I guess. Like kids are kids. So
Mm-hmm.
his books with kids always speak to me more. But man, there's a just tight knit group of friends, and each one of those kids is drawn so well. You just know them. You feel like
Yeah.
you're in the losers club with them. And then the switch back from the when they're kids to almost 30 years later,
Yes.
just
Yeah. Really well
masterful,
done.
masterful.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And I will clarify that, when we're saying which books move us the most, it
yeah.
may not necessarily always be our
Be a fave.
favorite
Yeah,
books, because we're
yeah.
going to talk about that next. And there may be some differences, but
Hmm.
there may be overlap as well. My second book that just really moved me was The Green Mile,
Mm,
which originally came out in novellas, and then you can
yep.
get the full published version put together. But it was different. It was not the typical Stephen King, and it was so compelling. But I just felt so badly for John Coffey. Oh, what a it's painful, to
Yes.
see. Oh,
Yes.
so I was
And
very moved. That was one the ending of a story where I don't cry, man. I do not cry, but I think I had wet eyeballs on that one. It's like,
yeah, well, I did not have that on my little list here, but also love that book. And I was just reading about that last night that The Green Mile was a huge experimentation in publishing. Uh, and it was so publishers had a date and King had a due date, a hard, and then
interesting.
this was one of the first times that it these little chapbooks or novellas or little pieces were released worldwide in all translations the same time. So no one
Wow.
could read ahead, no one could cheat, and everyone was just
Ah.
waiting for it. And you know, I what I read was after the first one, they were kind of going crazy, like we won't have time to make adjustments in production run if it doesn't sell like we think it will. But it basically blew it out of the water,
Yeah,
and
it's
there
so
was nothing
good.
to worry about after the first. But also King, when he when the after the first two came out, he had no idea how they were going to end up too. So it was a schedule for him, and I think that comes through in it. There's an energy in there that's just makes it a really good book.
Yeah. Your next one?
My next one is a cheat because I'm lumping The Dark Tower. It's a lot of
It's
books.
one story.
Um,
I got it. Yeah. Yeah, yeah.
and I could pick my one Dark Tower, uh, but as a whole, that's his magnum opus, and it's kind of like the center of his multiverse. Everything harkens to the Dark Tower, but again, just like The Stand, uh, a, a main character, Roland the Gunslinger, some super great supporting main characters, and just their arc through the whole thing is just amazing. I
Can
I
we agree on
I
something
cried
though?
several times through the Dark Tower.
Can we agree though that the Song of Susanna is kind of
Yeah, it's not my favorite of the Dark Tower.
okay,
We
okay,
can
very
agree
good.
on that. Yes. I
All right.
I think I think the drawing of the three is maybe the most fun book of all time. It's
Okay.
just so
Yeah.
fun. He's just having a ball writing that. You can tell.
Yeah. Yeah. I've got two more on my list of ones that really moved me. Cujo.
Really?
Poor Cujo, man. This he's everything you want, and then he's not. And again, no spoilers, but inside he must have been screaming because this is so different from what he would want to be. So I felt really bad for Cujo.
Cujo was supposed to be a Bachman book. It was going to
I
be a
did not
Bachman
know
book.
that.
And the other thing I know about Cujo is Stephen King talks about it on writing. Um, he doesn't remember writing Cujo, which is sad because he was like heavy into the drugs and alcohol,
Mm,
and he's like it was written in just a fugue of cocaine, and
wow.
he doesn't remember writing it, which he considers really sad, like because the writing of it is the
It's
adventure for
still
him.
really good, but
I would
yeah,
not
wow.
put Cujo on my list, so that's interesting for you.
Our different
I mean,
experiences and perspectives. Yeah.
yes, yes. Okay, so my next one I've already talked about, Eyes of the Dragon. Um, it's one of King's most just straight fantasy. Um, and I'm just telling you about the book, but this goes into why I love it. But this was a book he wrote for his daughter, Naomi, who traditionally did not like any of his other books. Ew, Daddy, write a story for me. So that was his story for his daughter, and the main female character is named Naomi. The main male character is named Ben, who was the son of Peter Straub, who he collaborated with.
Okay. Yeah.
But just that story, it's just so fun as a fantasy, but it's also Stephen King. So, uh, and the bad guy is his constant bad guy. It's the same bad guy from The Stand, same
Yep.
bad guy from The
Yep.
Dark Tower. So it's just a fun. I This is the book that I tried to get my kids to read, and they still are not Stephen King. They're in high school, and they're like, yeah, no. But it's a good starter, Stephen King.
Okay. My last one is The Dark Half, a
Another interesting
scarily
one.
dark and disturbing story that I, it- I got into understanding the perspective this author is having and the experience and how horribly things turn, and I could just feel it. I'm like, ooh, and that one left memories. I'm like, oh, so not because I was so, oh, it's wonderful. It was just,
It moved you
oh,
in a
this
in a
one
scary
moved
way.
me in a disturbing way. So
Yeah,
it stuck with me.
noteworthy. That is Tabitha King's least favorite novel. You can probably guess why.
I could, yeah, I could understand.
And actually, I think that came out of the uncovering of Richard Bachman too, and his ire that someone blew the cover on that. Um,
Okay.
so yeah, and a very interesting book, also one that I would not put on my list of like, oh. My last one, uh, oh, I have two more.
Feel
So,
free. Tell them
okay,
both.
okay, I'll tell them both. I'll try to be more brief. The Long Walk, and this may be
Okay.
more recency bias, but um, that one is I guess that'll be like the dark half for you. Like, oh, it's so heart-wrenching. Like, uh, there is there's technically a winner, but there is no winner in the Long Walk.
Mm,
I'm
yeah.
trying to be spoiler light, but also
Right.
just very, very, very intensely. He's in that character's head so much. I mean, it's a 16, 17-year-old boy, and he writes that so like it takes me right back to myself in high school. Um, and then my other one is The Talisman, uh,
Okay.
written with Peter Straub, so it has a little other flavor in it.
Yep.
Um, and Straub tends to be a little more flowery, and his style is just different. But
Hmm.
those two styles together, and
They work.
the main character is a child, which
Yeah.
but just a beautiful story, beautiful story.
And when you read it with Black House, put the two together, it's even better.
Yes, yes,
Yeah.
yeah. Sadly, Peter Straub died very recently, and
Yes.
they had talked for long years about there's one more story in that Jack Sawyer
That could
group,
have been. Yeah.
and
Yeah.
they just didn't. Their schedules didn't work to write it, and then Straub's
Right.
health was failing, and
Yeah.
so we'll never get that third one.
All right. So that finishes up the ones that touch you.
Yeah, the moving ones.
Let's talk about the favorites. Now, I just pulled at random two lists out there. I mean, there are so many lists of the best Stephen King books. You do Google
Yeah.
search, and everyone has different opinions. But I found a couple that I thought I'd throw here. One came from vulture.com
Okay.
that put as let me go from the bottom. Number 5 of the top 5. Number 5 was Misery.
Mm,
Number 4, Different Seasons, which is a
a
short story
collection.
or novella collection
Yeah.
with Rita Hayworth and the Shawshank Redemption, Apt
Apt
Pupil, The
pupil.
Body, and those three all became great adaptations. And then The Breathing Method, which I don't remember.
Hmm.
I know I've read it, but I don't remember that one.
Yeah, that's a
Maybe that's why there's no
spooky
adaptation.
story. Yeah, it's in one of his collections. It's spooky.
Yeah.
Uh,
Number 3, The Shining, which we haven't talked about at all yet, but The Shining. Number 2, It. Now, I fudged because technically number 2 on this list is On Writing, but because it wasn't fiction, I was like, nah,
right.
I'll move
Yeah.
that out. And then number 1 on this list was The Stand. The second one I pulled was from Goodreads, which is just, fans voting.
Right. Voting.
And in this one, the top 5 were number 5, Carrie, number 4, Misery, number 3, The Stand, number 2, It, and number 1, The Shining. So
Hmm.
interestingly, 4 of those 5 were on both lists, just not
Yeah.
the same order.
Yeah.
So I'd like to hear maybe our top 5. If
Top
I don't
five.
know, did you come up with more than 5, less than
No,
5?
I have less than five, but I could definitely come up with more. I mean, again, I cheat because Dark Tower I kind of lumped together, but I do
I
have
did too.
favorites within
I
that.
did too because it's in
Okay.
my top 5 as a series. So you're
Okay.
you're good.
Okay. Uh, yeah.
So I want to go back and forth with top or bottom to top again. So
Okay.
take a moment and think
Okay,
of
I
what
didn't
you'd put
rank
to
them. I
fill out
just
your.
put my favorites, so I'm gonna have to think in ranking here.
I'll just do a little song and dance to fill some time,
It's
give
not
you
gonna
the
be
moment.
hard. It's not gonna be hard. Uh,
And of course, there are a bunch of them that I haven't read yet, so none of those have a chance in my top 5. Mine are all therefore a little older. But
Yeah.
I did notice on both of these lists that I pulled, the top fives are all more the older classic kings, not any of the newer recent stuff. It might be
No.
less people have read the newer stuff, or is it saying it's
Yeah.
not hitting with as many people anymore? It's an interesting question.
He has said in interviews like it's super depressing to be told that your best work was something you wrote like 40
40
years
years
ago.
ago.
Yeah, which I could totally see like, well, that was your peak, man. That's sad. Okay, I've got my list out. After we're done recording, I'll probably be like, dang, but
All right,
I,
hit me
I
with your number
ranked them.
5. What would your number 5 be?
Okay, so I'm stealing this from those lists you read because as you read the names, I was like, yeah, different seasons. Um,
Okay, really?
again, it's sort of a cheat because each of those stories is their own thing, but
Yeah,
what a powerhouse collection. I mean,
right?
it's and you're right, some of the best movie adaptations from that too.
Yes.
But they're
Yes.
great stories. If you've only seen the movies, you should definitely
Definitely.
read the books.
Source material is always better than an adaptation. I
Yes,
cannot
always.
yet think of an adaptation I've watched where it surpassed the
Mm-mm.
book or novella or whatever that it came from. And sometimes it absolutely ticks me off. But okay, that's a different story. Oh, we have a different episode about adaptations that you guys
You
can
have a
find
question of
elsewhere on the
worst
channel.
adaptations. We'll get there.
Yes, yes, we will. All right, my number 5 is Salem's Lot. I just like that story. It's creepy, it's scary, it has all the good elements of what King brings to a book. It involves a kid in part, so
His
yeah,
second
it's all
book
there.
ever. Yeah.
And it was bam, it was a winner right off the bat. So that's my 5. What's your 4?
My four is going to be The Stand. It's only number four, Jim.
Wow,
Um,
Eric.
yeah. Well, I've
Well,
read more than you, so we'll see what
yeah,
you think for your
I'm gonna
top.
return that right at you though, and put my number 4 is the Dark Tower. The
Oh,
series is all the way down to number 4 for me. But
okay.
when I go back and reread it, it might go higher up because a key reason I have to reread that is there's so many connections to other books King had written that
Yeah.
I hadn't read yet. And I'm finding those connections as I work through them and go, oh, yeah, that ties to that. And once I've got all that in place, then I go back and enjoy the
Yeah.
Dark Tower. And I think I'll get it at a whole nother level.
That is honestly part of the so much fun I had listening while painting and just taking in the entirety of the Dark Tower in like 2 weeks was
Wow.
like boom. Just
See, I read that as they were published, so I had to
right. So you're
wait.
waiting years and years in
Man.
between. Like
Which is why when you say he's redone the Gunslinger, I've never seen the redone version. Only read the original.
you've
So,
probably only seen the redone one because
oh, it was right
they
away
kind of
he redid
pulled the
it?
old one. It's like the stand. You can't find the
Uh,
78 stand anymore. But the
okay.
original Gunslinger didn't have anything about Tahine or the kind of things he developed later.
Okay.
So it's not much different, but you've
Although
probably only
I
read the.
might have read the very original because
That's true. You're
it
older than
it
me.
in many ways it felt disconnected from the rest of the series.
Yeah,
So, yeah, I probably read the unrevised. I'll
it
look forward
does
to getting into it
anyway. I
again.
mean, it's a very different book for him, and that's been great and bad. Like some people have picked up the Gunslinger and been like, don't like Stephen King, don't
Mm,
want to continue in the Dark Tower, but
yeah.
you totally should.
Mhm. Totally. Alright, what's number 3 for you?
My number three is Wizard and Glass from it's the fourth volume of the Dark Tower. Is that right?
Okay.
Third. It's the third. Oh,
I'd have to double check.
I'm being now I'm questioning
I
myself.
know The Gunslinger is book 1 and The Dark Tower is book 7. I
You
can
know
tell
what?
you
No.
those.
Wizard and Glass is number four, and I'm gonna I had two next to each other and I wrote the number on the wrong one. Drawing of the Three. That's my
Okay.
number three. Drawing of the
Got it.
Three is number three. As I said before, it's just So that one came out in 87, I think. Yeah, 87, which was like King Gold years. The 80s were his decade.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
Drawing of the Three, I listen to when I want like just fun. It's so amazingly fun. It's just I don't know how else to describe it.
Hmm.
But also, well, no, that would include a huge spoiler. I can't tell you why else.
Yeah, let's not go there. We want them to read it. Now, most of
Yes.
the people who are watching this probably have read them already, especially because those are the fantasy
Let, let
heavy
me
books
let
of
me do
Stephen
a
King.
spoiler light super great hint. There's one reason why most people hate the gunslinger, and that is fixed in Drawing of the Three. Ooh.
Ah, there you go. There you go. All right, my number three, a book we haven't mentioned at all yet, Needful Things.
Hmm.
I love Needful Things. And it's kind of like the last book of a section of King's style of writing. I mean, it is officially the last book of Castle Rock, and
Yes.
it was cool. I just really liked Needful Things. So it holds a place in my top five.
Yeah, I was just reading about this too. It came out in 91. Uh he said he was going to be done with Castle Rock after that. Spoiler, it might show up again.
It
Um
might.
but yeah, that's a delightfully it's a good commentary on how people are a-holes.
Yeah, yeah. And how,
People are
you ought to
petty and
just be
small.
content with life, okay? Just be
Exactly.
content, people.
Sorry, I don't know if I was allowed to say that word. It was this is a
Oh, you
PG-13
can. You
broadcast,
can.
right? Okay.
Zach uses language. Guests use language. I don't use
Right.
language on the
Jim's
show. That's
clean, but
all.
the rest of us can. Well,
I'm
I'm
clean
also
on this
a
show. I guest on other things sometimes, and okay,
yeah, yeah.
you're influenced by who you
That's as
hang with.
bad as you'll get. I'll clean it up.
All right, number two.
My number two is Desperation,
Ooh, okay.
which you probably haven't gotten to yet. It's 96.
Yeah, I have not.
So square in the middle of the 90s, which were hit and miss, I think, for Stephen King, but Desperation hits. And it's like I said uh, at the beginning, this is his most explicit exploration
Wait,
of
no,
God.
no, Desperation. I've read Desperation. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
No,
yeah. The
that's in
town
what I
in
caught.
Nevada, the mining town in Nevada.
Yeah.
Yeah. So this one's special to me because it's a great book, but also I got married in Chicago, but I am from Colorado. So I listened to Desperation on the drive from Colorado to Chicago to get married. And then I
Ah.
forced my new bride to listen to it as we drove back across the United States for our honeymoon.
And you're still married.
We're still married. Well, what I learned about her, which is one of many things I've learned in those 19 years since then. 19, that's a Stephen King number, which you may or may not know about. But
Did
anyway,
not.
what I learned about her is she can't listen to audiobooks. They put her to sleep almost immediately.
My
So
wife can't handle audiobooks either. I don't know what
yeah,
it is.
I'd
Maybe it's a
constantly be
male
like,
female
"Wake
thing.
up!"
I don't know.
Yeah, I'd be like, "Wake up! You're missing a good part." And yeah, I gave up on it. But so I listened to it right before and right after I got married, which was, of course, a super happy time.
Hmm.
It's not a super happy book,
I'm like, and
but
okay, the title Desperation in front of and behind of getting married.
yes,
That's
yes,
kind of funny when you think about
tells you somethit about me and maybe why I'm on the same wavelength as Mr. King.
it. All right. My number two is It. So when you were talking about your value for, it and all the things, I'm like, yes, yes, I'm hearing all of that. I'm feeling all of that. I just love
Yeah,
that story.
yeah, yeah.
And
It's a wonderful story.
yeah, it's so many layers and levels. It's good.
And
Definitely with the kids, I was able to relate. I was one of those kids as a kid,
mhm, yep, yep,
totally.
me too.
So yeah.
Well, and 1986, I think there was like some sort of worldwide magic going on in 85 and 86 because that's like all the best 80s movies were right there, Back to the Future, Top Gun, all the fun stuff happened in 1986. I was 7 years old, so I wasn't fully able to
I graduated high school and went to college. That was
yeah.
86. It
So
was a good
you
time.
you were
I
living the
met my
life.
wife that year.
Yes.
We weren't even dating yet, but we were in the same group of friends.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it's a good year. All right,
My
what's your number one?
my number one is it. For all the
Boom.
things we've just talked about, just a just a that's one of those books. I mean, as a like I said, an aspiring author, I just think, how can someone do this? It's like I I could never
Yeah,
imagine that this
yeah,
could come out of one person.
right.
It's amazing. It's amazing.
I feel that way about a lot of authors I follow, though. How do they think of
Yes.
this? The stuff Brandon Sanderson comes up with is
Yeah.
just how?
Yeah.
Wait, what? Oh, it's so creative and just mm, yeah.
Yes.
All
What's
right,
your
my
number
number
one?
one again. It's here, The Stand.
Yeah.
The only one I've made a point to read multiple times, and every time I've read it, I've gotten more, which is always the sign of a quality author. There's layers upon layers that you just won't get the first time, and you
Yep.
appreciate more and more as you read. So, yeah, The Stand.
Solid choice. I approve.
Thank you. It's almost like two books, even, You got the whole
It
first
is.
part, and then you move into the second, which is, whoa, what?
Did you
Now what's
did
this?
did you know that there's a reason for that? While he was
I'm
writing
sure
it.
there is a reason,
Yeah.
but please tell me what you know of the reason.
So
Tell all of us. We all
you'll
want to know.
yes, you'll see this in On Writing and other interviews if you dig. He got stuck. He's like, okay, I've got all these characters, this huge cast of characters,
Mhm.
and I've got them massing in two places. I don't know what to do. So, in a very un-Stephen King-like fashion, like 6 months, he was like, I can't throw it away. I've written 600 pages already. Uh, so finally, on one of his long walks, he
Nice.
he thought, I, I just need to. He was like thinking in desperation. Um, I got to blow this up, and then he
Man,
thought,
you just keep them coming. You just keep them coming.
and then he thought, yes, I just have to blow this up. So there's a point in the book at which there's an explosion, and then it moves forward. So he
Okay.
he he
Yeah.
needed to take some of the characters off the page, and then he was going again. And
There you
he
go.
said the rest of the book was just flowed
That
like
makes
it
sense.
normally does.
That makes sense. I can
Yeah.
picture that. All right, we're going to move into the last main topic that's going to have substance here, and that's adaptations. So there have been so many movie and TV adaptations of
So
Stephen
many.
King's works. And and I enjoyed for on how so many of them Stephen King cameos somewhere in there. It used to be a
He's a
thing trying to
horrible
find. It's
actor.
like, where's Waldo? Where's King?
Yeah.
He's not an actor at
No.
all. But you'd be like, there he is. It was fun.
Yeah.
I enjoyed that. Him and and then Stan Lee with Marvel movies was
Yep.
basically copying him in
Yeah.
doing that in so many of those early movies. There's Stan, but Stephen King did it first. Um, good stuff. Good stuff. So I want to talk about both our best opinion, our best adaptations, and our worst adaptations. And I want to go back and forth a little bit here so we don't get too heavy on the best. And
Sure. Sure.
I don't know how many you have on your list. So I want to ask that first because I have 7 on my best list. How many are in your best list?
6.
Okay, well, that works out. And I have 4 in my worst.
Yeah. So my caveat is I have not seen a lot of the adaptations, especially the older
Oh,
ones. I have I only have one solid and then two that King would say on my
okay.
worst
Okay.
list.
Well, with our numbers being a little off, let's just stick to the best first, and then we'll
Okay.
move to the worst. So we'll go back and forth again. We'll see if we have any overlaps. I don't have these ranked.
Me either.
These are my best. These are the ones I really like.
Yeah.
All right, my first best is The Green Mile. I like how they brought that to the screen, a Tom Hanks movie with a great supporting cast. The guy who plays John Coffey, I forget his name now. Big,
Michael something.
yes, he's passed away. He passed away early,
Yeah.
sadly.
Yeah. Yeah.
He was also in Armageddon. He's been in a few things. He was great anytime I saw him.
Super great guy. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
I
and
heard he
he
was super
so brought
nice.
that character to life. Oh,
He did.
and yeah, I heard that about him too.
That's one of
So
those ones where it's tough now to read the book and not see him when you go back to reread.
totally, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. All right,
That's on my list too, so we can knock that out. It
okay.
wasn't the first one I wrote down, but it was the second one I wrote down.
All right, all right. So we've both shared one, we'll say there. Here's
Yes.
another one I got. The Stand, but the first version, not the second version. I liked the first one. I
Okay.
really liked how some of those characters they brought them to life for me. So now when I reread, I see certain people.
Was that the
I
Gary
didn't feel that.
Sinise one?
Yes,
Yeah.
yes, exactly. I didn't feel the same way on the second one. I didn't even finish the second adaptation that was on CBS streaming.
Yeah, I heard about that and I have not even tried. I I think that is not on my list for the reason that it's just too big to turn into a quality movie. You just have to cut so much out.
That's
I
true.
yeah. Um, my next one on my list, or the first one, since we did the second one, is The Shawshank Redemption.
Yes, it's on
Yeah.
mine too. So you get a twofer on that one.
Yep. Based on the novella Rita Hayworth and The Shawshank Redemption, of course. Just
Yeah.
I think in high school I watched that movie probably like 20 times.
And again, neither of us knew that was Stephen King when
Nope.
we saw the movie.
Nope.
Yeah.
And he's got a famous interview tale too about like this old lady coming up to him at the supermarket. You're Stephen King, aren't you? Yes. Well, I don't like what you write. You should write something good like the Shawshank Redemption. And he's like, I wrote that. And she's like, no, you didn't.
No, you
And
didn't.
he's like, that was like my first surreal fan experience. Like, yes, I did.
Love
But
it.
great
Love it.
movie, great movie.
Yes. And I mean, of course, it's got Morgan Freeman in it. Anything with Morgan Freeman, he
Yeah,
can carry a
guar-
movie.
guaranteed gold.
All right, so you got the twofer, which means I've had a turn again already. So you go on with another one.
Uh, I'm gonna go with one of the newer ones, It Chapter
Okay.
1. Only Chapter 1. I think
Ah,
Chapter 2 strayed a little. It became more of a scary clown movie. But I think It Chapter 1 did a good job of capturing the Losers Club and just that feel of camaraderie that they
okay.
had. And the clown was great. I mean, uh, another name that escapes me right now, but the actor who plays
Oh,
Pennywise,
yeah,
he's
what is his name? I've seen him in a few things now. Plays creepy really well.
yeah.
Um,
And
I'm escaping.
he can do that weird smile and turn one of his eyes out. Like that's just something he can physically do. It's
Oh,
not an
wow.
effect.
Ah,
Um, so yeah,
okay.
that captured the feel of it for me.
I
Also,
have to
of
admit
course, not as good as the book.
the original miniseries, It,
Is good.
I liked it.
Is
That
good. Yeah.
really so it was hard. They did it a totally different way with part 1, part 2 then, whereas the original, they went back and forth a lot.
Right. Right.
So that
That's
maybe is a little truer to the book, the miniseries.
yeah, and it's good in a campy classic adaptation kind of way too.
Yes, yes. All right, my next one is The Mist. I like the adaptation. It strays from the book, but not in the feel of the book. In the true elements that it brings to you as a viewer. So for
Yeah.
that, I really like the adaptation. Oh, the ending is just heart tug, man.
Yeah, only recently saw that. It came out in 2007, but I just saw that recently, and I thought it was solid too.
Yeah,
But it's not
good.
on my list.
What
My
else is on your list?
The next one on my list is Misery.
Yes, that's a twofer for you. Yep.
Yes,
Oh,
love
Kathy Bates, man.
Kathy Bates,
Oh,
James Caan. I mean,
yes. And they
both
both
play those
did those
characters so
performances
well.
so well.
Yes,
Yes.
yes. And James Caan,
Oh,
another person who just died. But here's a fun fact about Misery. My daughter is the other horror person in our family. So I've
okay.
slowly been she's
Bringing
she
her
doesn't
over to the
read as
dark.
much. Yeah, she's a junior in high school, so she doesn't have time to read, but she loves to watch movies. So we watched Misery together, and she loved it. The the very day we found out the next day that James Caan had passed, the day we watched Misery, how freaky is
Wow.
that?
Yeah.
So
Oof.
that added a like, ooh, kind of sad, but also like what are the
Right.
odds? What are the odds?
Yeah.
Because Misery came out, the movie is like early 90s, right? 1990. So
Yeah.
um
So good.
yes, so good.
So, all of you watching this video later, we do hope you're gonna tell us your favorites as well. Put it down in the show notes or hit us up on Discord or Twitter or something. But
Because I
are we
haven't
hitting
seen a
some of
lot of
your
them.
favorites?
Yeah.
Or are you like, really? You guys are idiots, on some of our favorites. We want to hear. Give us your
If they
feedback.
call us idiots about Misery and the Shawshank Redemption and the Green Mile, then they're the
Well, they
idiots.
can be wrong. It's
No
okay.
offense,
Some
guys.
people are wrong.
They're wrong.
What's okay? So you got a twofer on that, so you get to go again.
Yes. How many did I say I had? Six? One, two, three, four. I've done
I
four, so I have two more.
and I have
Seven, you said.
two. Yeah, so I have two more as well. So this works. Yeah. Go
Okay,
ahead.
so I'm saving my very best for last. So
Okay.
this is the not best. Um, this is one I very recently saw, even though it was the officially the only the third adaptation ever, and that's Creepshow, 1982.
Interesting.
And
Wow.
and
That's
it's
on your
only
best.
it's on my
Okay.
best because
It's
it is
quirky,
like
man.
early 80s, super campy. The
Oh,
effects, the
so
practical
campy.
effects were just horrible but
Uh-huh.
awesome and just hilarious. And
Okay.
also I put this on because uh, his son Joe plays. He's the boy that bookends, the boy
Oh,
with the
okay.
mean dad. And then Stephen King is the main character in one of the stories, and he's so bad. He's just so horribly bad. It's just
Yes.
hilarious. And then third reason, in On Writing, he tells a story about they had been filming for Creepshow, and his son Joe had a special effect of his dad slapped him, so he has this big red fingers mark on his cheek. So they finished a long day of filming. The kid is tired and whiny and is wanting to go to McDonald's for a shake.
Oh no.
So they get to McDonald's and they walk in and it's been a long day. And Stephen King is like, just get a milkshake for the kid, so shut up. And he's like, and I noticed the faces of the people behind the counter are like, and I look over at Joe, and he's still got this huge red welted slap mark across his face, and I think, oh God, they're gonna call the police on me. So so there's info behind that I
Got
had
it.
read and on writing several times, but never seen Creep Show. And when I saw it, it was like everything I hoped it would be and more.
Okay.
So
All right. Well, my second to last, again, these aren't in order, but The Shining, the original Stanley Kubrick classic with Jack Nicholson. And really good movie. Really great acting. I've actually looked into a lot of behind the scenes of that movie. It was traumatic to make,
yeah,
very challenging because Kubrick is just insane as a director, but that's how you get some of the things that he can bring out to the screen. And that movie will freak you out. It's so well done. And that book, if you really understand what you're reading, will freak you out. So good
Yeah,
adaptation.
I have to zip my lips on this one because it's going to come up in my worst list. But here's something interesting, and I'm glad you brought this up as a favorite. Um, I had not realized that I had never read The Shining until like 2 years ago
Oh,
because
wow.
I thought I had read it because I'd seen the movie. And I was like, yeah, yeah, The Shining.
Um,
Yeah, yeah, I have memories of that. And then I was like, have I ever read it? And I listened to the audio and I was like, no, no, I've never read this before.
how about that?
So, so my first read of The Shining was probably 2021, and it's
Okay.
one of his earlier books.
Yes.
It's um when did the book come out? In the 70s, 77.
Was
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. It's the
So
early period, but it's good. Really good. All right. What do you have? Your last
my
one on your
my
best list,
my
right?
last and best, Stand
I
by Me.
wonder. Stand by me. Okay.
Stand by Me. Sorry, I didn't build to it.
I have to admit, I've never seen Stand by Me.
Oh,
I
that
know the
you know
music.
what you're doing the rest of the morning after we turn this off. Rob Reiner,
It's classic.
80s
I've heard
80s
all
Rob
about it.
Reiner, right? So it's based off. This is another one I didn't know was Stephen King, and this we can be forgiven more because it's a different title. Is based off the
Yeah,
short story The Body,
the body.
but very true to the story, down to the one of the stories within the story. Um,
Okay.
and it just my kids actually love uh, Stand by Me, and I'm like Stephen King, and they're like, no, that's not Stephen King. Yes, it is. It's
Yes,
Stephen
it
King.
is.
And some actors that went on to be noteworthy
Big things.
after.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, so, and
Okay.
also behind the scenes on that one, I mean, Rob Reiner, he he had a real rough relationship with his father, and Stephen King's father
Mm,
walked out when he was 2, so he kind of latched on to that wavelength, and that you could feel that in the movie.
okay.
Excellent movie. It holds up. It will hold up forever.
All right.
Again, 86. I mean, like those magical years.
Well, my last one on best adaptations, Pet Cemetery. The original movie version of Pet Cemetery.
Mm, yes,
It's so disturbing, so well acted, and
yes,
it really brings that book to life for you. It makes you, uncomfortable in all the ways you're supposed to feel uncomfortable
yes.
and
Visceral.
horrified, and love them. I've watched that movie multiple times.
I think I've only seen it once a long time ago, but as soon as you said it, I saw that little hand come out and slip the Achilles tendon, and I was
Right.
like, "Ugh."
Of Herman Munster. How can you do
Oh,
that to
Herman
Herman
Munster.
Munster?
Exactly. Oh, yeah, yeah. That's a good one. Good one. I
All
agree.
right, worst adaptations. So
So,
I'm just gonna
yeah, you start because you
we've
have a
got
lot.
I've got 4, you've got 1, and then 2 others that are kings. So yours have more explanation. Let me just throw my 4 out here.
Okay.
The Stand, the second version, because I couldn't even finish it. I'm a completionist. I always finish things, and this did not hook me at all. I was
No.
bored, done. Ah. The Dark Tower. It fell short as an adaptation, and I want better, but that's a really hard thing to do a decent adaptation for. So,
Hmm.
the Tommy Knockers. I don't know if you ever saw that.
No, but the book is one of
Weird,
the.
kind of a sci-fi
Oh,
Stephen
yes, I
King.
did see it. I did see it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, and it's just not a very good movie.
Yeah.
Might be a good adaptation, but it's not one of the stronger books. So,
Yeah.
it's just. And the last one, The Langoliers, which I think is based on a short story or novella,
Oh,
actually. It's
that's
not a full
actually
novel.
the one that I've seen that I was thinking was the Tommyknockers, but the Langoliers. Yeah, yeah.
That's
Pretty
weird. It's a
pretty
weird
campy.
movie and can't be bad special effects. It was a
That's a
period of
weird
time
book.
where that's the best they could do.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's pretty
So
bad.
those are my worst adaptations.
Um, again, I tend to mostly enjoy all movies for something, for some
Mhm.
reason. And I don't go in with high expectations, which I think is why my list is very short because I can get something out of most movies. Um, but so as I looked through, I was like, yeah, most of these I haven't seen. Um, my one that I listed was The Dark Tower, um, just because it was an affront to that amazing work.
Right?
It
Yeah.
it was a good try. I mean,
And
I
nothing against Idris Elba. He's a great
no,
actor,
he's
but
awesome, and it was kind of cool to change the ethnic background of the main character.
it
I
didn't
think
bother me at
that
all.
part
Yeah.
worked,
No, it was fine.
but they just picked little pieces from
They
all through this huge
adapted
thing.
too much. You can't
Yeah,
change it up like that. Not a story of that caliber.
yeah, it was not. If you didn't know anything about Stephen King, it would probably be an okay movie.
No, I think it's still not a very good. I mean, it didn't do really
You're right.
well in
You're right.
theaters, so it's
It
it's kind of a
crashed.
mess.
Yeah, yeah. So I agree with you on that. The Dark Tower, and you know, I also was slightly disappointed. I mean, I think Stephen King in this decade has been, I don't know, he was more like, yeah, go see it. I think it was really good. And I'm like, oh, Stephen, you know it's not good. You just want to make some more money. Like, don't he has spoken out against before, and that has made me respect him. And that's the other two that I have. So to have him be like, I think this is gonna really go big, I was like, you knew it wasn't. You knew it wasn't. Don't lie to us to get us to
Or is he
watch it so you
starting to
can make
slip?
money.
Are you slipping a little, Mr.
Yeah,
King? I know you're getting old. Uh,
I just no, no, it wasn't good. So my other two, there could definitely be more. But I like campy movies. So but my
okay.
other two are what King would say are bad adaptations. King famously and controversially spoke out against The Shining. He did not like the Kubrick version.
Wow.
And
Really?
I've read extensively about this, and I think I know why. And I think he said it. So it's not like I've brilliantly uncovered this. Um, so The Shining was written, the main character is an alcoholic. Stephen King, when he was writing that, was totally an alcoholic, but in denial about it. He did not know he was an alcoholic. Like you'll read interviews much later where he's saying like, "Yeah, I was really how could I write that book and not realize I was pretty much writing about myself."
Mm.
So in Kubrick's version, Jack Torrance is all evil. There's nothing redeeming about him, and he lives and ends just with a I'm bad. In the book The Shining, there's there's a moment of redemption before the end where you know, he's still lost, of course, but he kind of comes out of that and realizes, and you know, there's a redemption. And I think that, you know, when the movie came out, he was still too close to that even subconsciously and was thinking like, no, 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 I think he took it personally like maybe there's no redemption for me either.
Mm.
So I
Wow.
think it was just so intensely personal that um he was like, you suck, Kubrick. um he doesn't like, and he'll still say I don't like that movie, and that's behind it. The other
What's the
one
other
that
one he's got a grudge against?
The other one is The Running Man. He's like,
Ah,
my character was
Arnold
nothing like
Schwarzenegger
Arnold
in a Stephen King
Schwarzenegger.
movie. That movie is hilarious and
It is.
delightful, though. I enjoy it so much. Richard Dawson running the game show.
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
great.
it's a great movie, but Stephen King hates it because he's like,
Man, I
that's
want to
not my
watch that
book.
one again now.
I do too. But Stephen King is like, that is not my book. You just use the title. So
Pretty accurate, actually. Yeah,
mm,
that's a goes way astray in the adaptation, but a
yeah,
fun movie.
yeah.
All right. Well, Stephen King is still putting out books. I don't know how long he's going to keep at it, but we're loving it as long as it goes. His next book, Holly, is scheduled to drop again in September. So about a
Hmm.
month after Fairy Tale, or a year, almost a
Yep,
year to the
just a
day for
year.
when it's scheduled. I assume you're going to pick it up right away and go to
It's
it.
it's on my pre-order.
There you go.
I've already
I will
pre-ordered.
get to it eventually. Still have too many other books in the way, but I'll get there. I'll get there. Eric, as the Stephen King fan you are, is there anything we should have talked about that we haven't? Is there anything you want to add?
Yeah, I think as I told you before, when I tell people Stephen King is my favorite author, they're like, "Why?" Uh, and they, he's fought against this for a while and finally accepted it. People think I'm a horror writer, but he's not a horror writer. He writes whatever he wants. He's famous for crossing genres, and this
Mm-hmm.
new Holly book is representative of that because it'll be the fourth book in the Mr. Mercedes, which is more like hard-boiled detective kind of than supernatural horror. Although there's almost always some supernatural.
There's
So
always something, some element
always,
of King
almost
there.
always,
Yeah.
not always, but so people pigeonhole him and refuse to even read. I don't read that stuff, but he's a remarkable writer in just in his prolificness. But I think he's the reason I admire him is his insane work ethic. I mean, he you'll see in interviews he'll be like, yeah, I tell people that I don't write on my birthday and Christmas, but I write every day. I have to. I'm compelled. I it's not it's not a good day if I don't write. So on vacation, on his birthday, on the weekend, he writes, which is amazing to me. And I also, this is Jim, you'll want to read on writing because this shows he he beat a pretty bad alcohol and drug addiction. I mean, he could have died, but he beat that um, through writing. And that's why I said before his faith was there, his wife and family were there, but he really just put all that into his writing, and he's been sober since I think the early 90s for a long time. So
Okay.
he's not only a success story, but he's a an underdog story. And he scrapped in the beginning, just like most writers. He wasn't an instant success like, boom, 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 here you go, Stephen. Now I'm Stephen King.
Mm-hmm.
He had a spike in his wall with all the rejections on it, like most writers. So as an aspiring writer, he's inspirational. Don't quit, keep going, and um, he's just a super fascinating guy. Um, I'll be sad when he dies, but I do think he'll write till he dies. He's also said in interviews
It's
like,
just what he does.
I want my family to tell me when to stop publishing. I'll never stop writing, but I hope my family will be like, it's time to stop putting it out there. But Fairy
Okay.
Tale is solid, man. It's kind of old
Good.
school. I don't think he's lost much. He's 76. Um, and he slowed down a little, although still a book a year. That slow for him
It's
is
not
like
super slow.
fast for 99% of other authors.
Right?
So read on writing at least. It's not scary, um, and you'll just learn more about one of the most fascinating writers of our time.
All right. Well, I am hoping at some point we can talk about your writing as you still do this. You got your spike with rejection letters somewhere, probably too, and
It's all
it's
electronic
hard.
nowadays.
I mean, you've got a whole trilogy done, or
I
is it
I
the
have
first two
written
books?
I've written the first two and plotted out the third one, and I'm just probably about 10,000 words in. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Well, if you ever decide, forget them and go independent publishing, we'd
Yeah.
love to feature that and give you a spotlight. I've done that for indie authors already before.
Yeah.
It's a route, and sometimes that can be the way you finally get recognized and someone
It
picks
might
you up.
be. It might be. I mean, I'm being steered just like Stephen King and you and everyone else, I believe. So so yeah, that would be super fun. This has been super fun. I want to thank you for the chance to talk about Uncle Stevie, as I call him.
There you go. Well, thanks for accepting the invitation. It's been a blast to have you on with us here. Everybody out there watching, I hope you've enjoyed as well. And if you did, you know what you're supposed to do now. Hit the like button so people know this was worthy and help other people find us. And if you haven't somehow subscribed yet, please do. You know, Stephen King sucked you in for the first time. Great. We've got a lot of other stuff here on this channel. Check out our content. Find all the ones that my wild and crazy, quirky son Zach is with me, and he's a hoot. I mean,
He
I'm
is
the better looking one, but that's okay. You know, it's all good.
arguably.
And again, thank you, Eric, for being here. I'm going to run our outro now to remind people of all the other ways that they can get in touch with us here. Liking, subscribing, that's just the request again. We do have a Discord server. Eric's on Discord. Once in a while, we get an Eric sighting. Hey, Eric jumped in, you know, something, and it's fun.
The Stephen King stuff.
There you go. Ways to interact with us. We do have a Patreon page if you want to help us keep this going. We appreciate the support of all those who give us a little bit of money and get some extra benefits that way. And social media, email, we do actually still use email. Feel free to reach out. We always respond. Thanks for watching, everyone. We'll talk to you next time.